Hello everyone and most welcome to our lecture H735. And today I will talk about the two neuromuscular system we have. It's named the lecture Lack of Decoherence. You should by now be familiar with the fact that we as living beings have two different neuromuscular systems. The first one and the most common is fast twitch neuromuscular system. Without a doubt the most prevalent today. The absolute majority is having it. The other one is the slow twitch. And they have scientific names. We call the fast twitch or the flight or fight response neuromuscular system N2 T2. The T2 is the muscles and N2 is the neurological part. Sorry there. Some neurological problem there with my tongue apparently. The other one, the slow twitch, is called T1 and N1. And I want to speak a little bit about the different qualities they have, because I have beginning myself, that's one reason, to notice when I go from one system to another. And of course, do remember it's a sliding scale. Nothing is absolute here. But I start to notice certain traits I never ever noticed before. And it's extremely interesting. It's like a discovery. They give complete different experience of the world. Whether you are in one position in the fast twitch, you will get one reality, and in the slow twitch you will get completely other. Those systems cover perception, cognition, intelligence, movement, coordination, being, I would say. There's different modes of being depending where you are. Well, let's start with the most prevalent one. That's the one I mean notice. And I think if you do exercises, you will not note what you get. You will, however, note what you have on a daily basis. You will see the difference you get. And I think that's very important to remember. It takes a longer time to discover this system in comparison to this one. This is what you have now. This is what you want to have. But once you, with slow movement, go over to this system by, you could say by force, because if you slow down, your system have to go over to this. It doesn't have a choice, because this system cannot do quick movements. And this is the little loophole we found, how to access. Otherwise, it could be very hard to access this. Usually, in most cases, once you got into this, you stay there. But let me go into the different things I noticed and what I can find from literature. This is mostly coming from Ken Ware and his research paper he made with different researchers, but also as referral. I will try to link his reference list in the description of the video. It's also coming from other research in the Alexander technique. That been especially the last, let's say, 10 years, it has been a lot of research. One can say of this area, the fast twitch, the FT, it's much more reactive, it's more unconscious, and it's more directly. we act directly when we are in that state. And I noted that after I did some training, I had a stimuli and I saw my hand moving before I start to think. And is very infrequent that people notice that. This is the Libet experiment in myself. So without me wanting it, without me knowing it, the hand started to move to do something. And this is very much T2N2. It reacts directly before thinking processes are activated. And you get a special feel for that because it's rather quick, the reaction. And it's also an action that's not influenced with intelligence nor intention. So there is no, it doesn't make sense, the actions. And neither, you will discover in the end, it's not what you want either. There's two things that you need to remember. It's not what you want and it's not intelligent. And that means both in the short run and in the long run. You could actually say that act and stimuli is the very same thing. We see something and we directly react. Oh, I see that, I go there. I don't think before, it just happens. And I have no control over it. It's, you could say, unconscious, but in a specific way, like day-to-day unconscious, not unconscious like sleepwalking. You're still aware at some level, but you're not aware of you yourself ever taking the decision to do that. And I can give an easy example. For instance, a person that smokes is 99% of the cases not aware he smokes. But other things we do, like maybe taking an extra step, the pull down reaction is largely that. But it's also how we react to situations, other people. It's non-informed, it's non-thinking, it's directly. And then I began to notice, the first thing I noticed what I had a reaction, and then if I follow that reaction, sometimes I wasn't able to stop it. I could also see that the hand, its very movement are actually different in T2 and N2 than the movement in the T and Tn. It's, for instance, if you do something with the hand, the grip is harder in T2 and N2. It's harder, it's not very eloquent, it's tough. You over-tense yourself, you take off your balance, and very usually your hands are a little bit like this. They are tensed because the tension, it starts here in the neck region, but you can easily see it in the hands, and they are a little bit like this. And this is one of the reasons I sometimes stand like this, and that's a double tension. I tense both my hands and I hold them. This you can often see today in photographs. It was very uncommon over 50, 60, 70 years. I made a Google image search and you can't find it. If you go back 60, 70 years, it's very uncommon. Today it's very common. Stand like this. This is the more normal. That's a tensed way of holding your hands. There are more severe ways of holding it, of course. I think this you can see in olden days. That's the olden way of, because the hands don't do as you want to. They don't follow your will. You want to put them somewhere. You put them here, or you put them there, or you can put them otherwise. You can even do like something like this, hold them. And you can see this is the sheer image of being in not a good place, so to speak. I can see an advanced, more, if you get even more stressed, I can see when I was working at the police station, if there's somebody who's a suspect, they usually start maybe this, and then they get more nervous for some reason. They usually start to do things with their head. This is a comforting way of doing. You comfort yourself, like your mom or dad used to comfort you, or just fondle you tap you on the head. You try to comfort yourself because you are in some distress of some sort. You can also do this, and this is an obvious sign of distress. You won't see a politician do that, even if they want to do it. They know nothing to show in front of the camera. This is a milder variety of that. This is like comfort yourself, like you hug yourself a little bit. People fought before Paul Ekman. I don't know if you heard about him, but he's the one that can become very good with helping FBI, CIA, how to sort of read people. And he came to the conclusion that we fought ever this is a defense mechanism to shut somebody out. But it's more of a comfort mechanism. Because here I both keep my hands locked, they don't move about. But I also sort of hug myself, give myself a little bit of comfort. One sense I get of these acts when I can see the difference. I can't see it all the time. Now in the afternoon, it's about 5 o'clock, you won't notice. You notice this when you are sharp, maybe in the morning. But I think we have a brief moment also in the evening where you have this extra sharpness. Maybe until 1 hour before you go to bed. Somewhere there you have an extra sharpness, you can notice that. But it's a lack of intention. You don't feel at ease to give attention to what you do. You are in what we mentioned before, the automatic state, the state that Kahneman, for instance, pins out, like he called it as one, self-one. The second is different but similar in some ways, and that is the action movement is not informed about reality. When I do these almost jerky things, my hand can touch other things on the way. I can bump into something because it's not informed by perception. I don't know where it is. And of course, if you are stressed, you're going to work, you're sitting in the car over the bridge to Gothenburg or something, you're bound to do things that you bump into things inside the car. You become more clumsy, you could say, a little clumsier. And you become rough with things. You mishandle things. You not only mishandle yourself, you mishandle things around you. You're not careful with the things you have. You press them too hard. You being maybe a bit hard with the shifts, pushing them in because it's on the verge of getting almost a bit annoyed, but it's before that state. The movements are not precise. You start to get a feeling when you jump in between this, when you do your training. You get a feeling you are in different moods. You have a more precise mood where your hands, your body does as you really want to. And it's a matter of degree, and you need to discover it first. And I think in the end what happens, as Jan says, you're going to crave the other way of being because it's so much better. It's better in any way. You don't lose anything by going over there. This is how we are constructed. And this is actually how all animals, with very few exceptions, caged animals, some caged animals, can be in that state. But all animals are working in that state. Another thing, and this is something I just noticed the other day, there is and this I think could be a further good point. This is going to be more clear to myself further on, and this is also mentioned by Libet in his further research. When you do this sort of hasty, clumsy movement, something happens to time. It seems to go quicker. It's like you don't even observe that time is passing. Everything went so quick. That's something you often hear just before they bump into an accident. I don't know what happened. And that's what could be called mind wandering. You're not wholly present. You're not in this locale as I am now. I don't know. In that instance, when I tense myself, I don't know my car is over there. It disappeared from my spatial awareness. And this spatial awareness is really, really important. It's a mixture between a perception sense and its thinking as well. As we mentioned before, thinking is spatial. And when that is cut out, it's a special quality to thinking that it's not so nice. It's not high quality thinking. And spatial thinking, as Mrs. Tversky explained, is incredibly important for human beings. And amazingly enough, there's still people to this day who think that, for instance, blind people don't have spatial thinking. Of course they have. Can't think without it. They move their hands when they are not observed, when they try to understand something spatial, which is everything. So the mind wandering is I jump out of the picture, so to speak. And how do I jump out of the picture? Well, I cannot leave reality. But what I do, I tense myself. This is how I shut perception off. Another thing which is most interesting is that when I am in the teacher mood, I don't finish the action in a good way. For instance, if you write something with your hand, the last part of what you're doing becomes quicker. You don't have the stamina to finish off in a good way. You can start, yes, but you usually don't finish off in a good way. There's no good ending. You just lift the pen or something. You just want to get it over with. It's boring, you want it finished. And every time you get a sense of boredom, you know it's this, because that's the only thing that can produce boredom. We know boredom only exists here. This is the boredom giver. Sometimes, if you get more into this mood, you even stop the action midway. And that is a sort of mind wandering. You see how action and thinking goes hand in hand. Mind wandering is starting different things, not having a direction. You walk that way, and then you remember something else, and you walk that way. You can see it's spatial as well, and then you walk that way. And in the end, what was I supposed to do? You see, this is the thing. So mind wandering is not only something you do in your head. And it could feel that way. Maybe you sit in the sofa, you do mind wandering. You say, oh, I'm not moving. Yes, you are moving. There's always a little movement. Now I can feel a movement in my toes. So I bet you'll have a movement. Even if you sit in the sofa, there will be some movement. In some people it's not so obvious, in some others it's obvious. It could be a little thing here. I remember a lecturer I had. He was a lecturer in the art of speaking. And he was standing completely still, very present. But I noticed something he did with his hand. Somewhere something came out and it was looking like this. He did a movement with his hand, it was quite obvious. And that hand movement he tried to hide. So somewhere it comes out. And very often it is in parts other people can't see. We mentioned the tongue, there's usually tension here. And my tongue tension is pressing the tongue to the down on the teeth here. So we do something, we keep the tension going. And it's a little bit, this system doesn't stop. T1, Tn, and 2 can never stop. Because if it stops, it gets bored. It needs to be in activity. So it, so to speak, starts its own activity. And it continues in sleep as well. It's not present during deep unconsciousness, of course. If you put under the knife and you get sedated, it won't be there. But in sleep and in waking states it's there. In a way, it could actually be compared to that twitching you feel when you fall asleep. But that is not exactly the same thing. But there is a similarity as well noticed. And all of you who had a pet, you've seen when the cat or the dog falls asleep, it does really peculiar movements. It sort of kicks, it does something with a paws. And that's when everything that's connected to any little tension is leaving the body. It's usually with a twitch or movement like that. And that's the normal tension leaving the body and you go to sleep. This is much more tension. And that tension doesn't leave your body. So you can actually sleep tensed. That's a surprise to most of you. But very few people today do not bring tension into the sleeping state. And I looked around in Google picture search and I found this catalog from Mio who make beds. And even the models who were sleeping in the beds to show how comfortable they were actually tensed. I saw this is a sheer cancer, this is tension, and it's odd that not even the photographer noticed that. This way of sleeping very tensed. Maybe it's so common today that we see it as normal, but it would not have been normal during the day of my grandparents, for instance, non-existent. It's actually quite an extreme tension to sleep with a fist made. But it's very interesting to understand that mind wandering do have its muscular equivalence. There's no mind wandering possible if you don't move in some ways, but the movement can be very, very small. Well, something you can check and at a more advanced state is that the microprocession also get much worse and the more you are in T2 compared to T1. And if you want to do something with precision, we don't do so many precise things these days. But if maybe you have a hobby of some sort, doing stones. I have a friend who carves stones. That demands a high level of precision. And then if you do something precise, you can notice the difference even more acutely. And that's good, because the more you notice, the more feedback goes into the system. And what I mention now is my own verbally conscious noticing. But you will notice even more things you never verbally express. You don't even think of them. But you can be very sure your system notes them. It's also the ordering of things. It's when you have this fast twitch, You don't care in what order you do things, you just rush for it. Not that fast maybe, but you never extend your back before you start doing something. You reach for it and then you extend your back when it's too late. And therefore the movement gets affected by this. And what will be exhorted in the movement is you're going to put too much effort, you're going to be too much tensed, and it will not be a good, strong ending to the action. It will be a loose ending, because the T2 is not capable of keeping force at a normal pace. That's why people who do skiing, for instance, I mentioned before, weightlifters, they need to have a continuous force, otherwise they won't be able to lift the weight. It's not enough with pure force. And if you're not continuous and you don't finish off well, the movement is going to be unequal. And when you win a contest, it's down to a kilo or two. The one who's the most precise, balanced is going to win. And here's another thing that's very interesting. The T2 system doesn't understand. And that's a big part of the problem. You do the action wrong, it's not followed up in a good way, it's not ended in a good way, and then you walk away. And the T2 system won't even notice. And that's down to the N2 nerves. They don't notice anything because they're not built to notice stuff. So you have a problem and you don't know it. And it's a very big part of the problem. Your system doesn't read that something's wrong with the system. It doesn't have a self-correction that you have to help with. The self-correcting tendency, you have to give room for that, opportunity for the self-correcting system to work, because it is working in normal human beings and in all animals. When they get too much into the T2, maybe it's a mouse that's been hunted by a fox, I saw the other day, the mouse will be self-corrected within 5 to 10 minutes and go back to its normal state. It will gain precision once more, so it doesn't become eaten up by the next fox. If it wouldn't be able to do that, it would be killed very soon, because we don't survive in the T2 mode. We can survive today though, and the reason is our world is not dangerous anymore. But what you will do is on the long run harm yourself health-wise or career-wise or otherwise, because you understand yourself is very important to be in reality. And T2 doesn't allow it, and neither does N2. They are actually built to shut out reality. Their job is to send you fleeing and nothing else. And they're actually also made for you not to feel pain in a normal way. Pain in the N2 will come just like a sharp nudge, very horrible. And that's because it would be confusing if you're fleeing, if you feel pain some other way, in a complicated way. So everything gets sort of simplified for you to be able to run away from the danger. But we are constantly in the danger zone now. That's what the T2 and N2 is doing. And one of the reasons we don't finish up in a good way, we don't finish the T, we don't finish our chore in our way, we tend to put some force into and then we walk away. Maybe it's a messy situation. That's something we can teach ourselves that would be helpful to do that. This will actually help the process. But there are even better things we can do, and that's going over to T1 and N1. But part of the reasons there is almost philosophical, because T2 and N2, they don't see a purpose in anything. They don't have a long run purpose. Well, think yourself, it's like just flee for the moment. You're not supposed to think for the long run. You're not supposed to be like the squirrels we have in the garden here. They plan for the winter. They are taking away all the seeds we gave them, put them in their cheek, and running away to their little hole somewhere and leaving whatever they caught or found, and put everything there so they have stash for the whole winter. They're not stupid, they plan. But we are constantly in the T2 and 2, so we won't be able to think into the future. That disappears. And that's, of course, very dangerous. You can imagine yourself, we don't think about the future. We are caught up in the now. And also the now is not really present to us because of this muscular tension. But having a lack of purpose is actually a muscular thing. And I would say it would be impossible for a person to say he has a purpose in life, whereas his body doesn't. That doesn't make any sense. And there is another thing that's quite interesting. We can show it like this. Let's see. Do you mind if I...
No, please.
I'm so happy with it. 2 whiteboards. It's pure luxury. In the T1 and 1 system, you have different actions you do, and we call this effort, and this could be time scale. And for instance, here you do an effort, you finish up good, and here you relax, you enjoy what you have done. And then maybe it's a calm zone and you do the other action, it goes up like this, and you have relaxing, you have reward, you've done it, you're happy, and you can be happy for a while, and then you do the next one. This is how it looks in the T1 and 1 system. But in the T2 and 2 system, there's a constant strain. This is this permanent flight and fight response. And that means that your engines are on all the time. But they get tired, so they can't perform as well when it's needed. That's why we don't finish off well. That's why we don't go into things with intention. And here we have a constant strain that's always present. It doesn't matter if you're doing the activity or you're trying to relax from the activity. And let's, for instance, say that the level is here. So when there is time for a strain, you will start a little bit late and you will finish earlier. And maybe a little bit like that. It will look like that instead. This is that line. So you never completely relax, because modern people, they don't understand to do things for the future. They are in the present. And that's the stress mechanism. That's the flight and fight response. And because of the permanent pressure, this could be your sleeping period, this could be your rest period, you never go down as you're supposed to. Therefore, you don't have any energy to put into the action. So you have a sort of a permanent half good action, not very good, not very well performed. And the catch-22 is here, because there's nothing to see that your action is very good, not so good, because for that you need to be in T1 and 1. That's the judge of how the action was. So now, of course, it's so much better to be in this, because you only put strain when you really need it. So your performance will be optimal, and then you can enjoy the fruits of what you have done. You can relax. But whereas T2 don't understand relaxing, reward, effort, putting into some extra stamina, really do it properly, and then relaxing. For T2 and 2, it's a constant strain, and they don't understand good things, what's good in life. Good in life is variation, of course, like it is for the squirrel. Once it's been working, filling the whole day, he can relax, maybe swimming around in all his seeds. Yeah, they'll be taking kilos of seeds. It's crazy. Actually starting to get on my nerves. I'm thinking of soaping the lead so they can't climb to get them anymore. I think I'm going to try that, to do that tonight. Squirrels. So we don't have a definite action. This strained action, this reaction stimuli, it's not very appropriate. It's not this fine thing. And that reminds me when I went many years ago abroad. I was sitting in buses, and I noticed the bus drivers, they cared about the shift gear in a way, so it was just incredible. And I remember I thought to myself one time, oh, they develop automatic gear shift for the buses here. Where did they get that? No, they were actually doing the shifting, but they did it in such a manner you couldn't feel it. And this is people who don't have T1 and 2. And then you get specific, then you get elegant in your movement. That's an automatic process. It happens, and it makes jobs so much more rewarding. Whereas in T2 and 2, it's more like the acts I'm doing. It's not necessary. I have to do it only, not from my own point of view. I have to do it for some other purpose that's not connected so much with me, and it doesn't seem to have a real purpose. And that's, of course, is what true boredom is, not this boredom that I need to move myself. I can't stand here. I need to move. That boredom is different. This boredom of never executing things in a nice way, never reaching your goals, that's an existential boredom. And I'd say that hurts a bit more. The odd thing is B here, the second thing. With this more ordered system that the T1 and 1 wants to have, it's more ordered, there actually is much more chance of spontaneity. And that's the interesting point. And that goes directly against those all theory of pedagogy today. We think that creativity gets smothered by too many rules. Rules for execution should not be followed. And I can give example myself because I've been painting for years. And half of the painting circles, they encourage what they call free movement. Like, do whatever you want. I'm going to give you a canvas. Use the color as you want. They are under this false impression that if you don't have any rules, if you don't have a system, creativity will come directly. Because otherwise you are stopping it, you're putting it down. And I think actually this is caused by people who are stuck in this. Because these people cannot get creativity anyway. So what they try to do instead is just splash color on the canvas, and they say that's what my muse did. And this is actually a very good explanation. Tversky mentioned that we can see this in the arts. She doesn't specify what she means, but I know what she means. She means modern arts. And speaking of that, we have a person who actually was in this state. Look where I'm pointing, T1 and 1. He made a painting. And that painting was praised like incredible. He wore a French beret, and his name was Louis Champmarchot, French name. And everybody said that his paintings were exquisitely modern. And you would think this person would have been in T2N2. No, that person has never been in T2N2. How is that possible? Who could this person be? Maybe it was not a person. Maybe that person, or what it was, is from the same town as my dear colleague, Kelly here. Do you know who that person was?
A monkey.
It was a monkey.
Bros.
And of course, a monkey cannot paint. That's another business. It can be completely harmonious and still do modern art. You don't have to be completely wasted in your body system to do these horrid things like the modernist has done. But everybody appreciated this. I think that goes to say the state of art today. We are so enforced by T2N2. We can't appreciate art, neither can we make it. Those two things are gone. And the third thing is, we think it's good, even if it's not good. A little bit like we think some food stuff are good for us, but that they cause us harm or something like that. It doesn't contain what we need. So it's very odd what you find out, and you get surprised, especially when you find out in the moment. I'm doing things I had no idea. And the other thing that's sometimes is hilarious and sometimes is scary. I do things I don't want to. And this is very typical of the T2N2 system, because if something happens here, if the fire starts, we will all run. And when people ask you, what did you do? How did you run? It'd be very hard for you to figure it out. Where did I run? How did I run? I only know I survived, you would say in the end. And this is what the scare reflex does with us. It makes us forget things because we can't put attention. There's no use putting attention. We need to escape, nothing else. But our lives become that way. And I would say this is actually what linear time is this disjuncted moments of stress. And we have no way of putting those disjuncted movements together because we are not a whole when we're stuck in this state. We are only separable movements with no tomorrow, no reward, no pleasure, only a stuck attitude. And there is a lack of complexity in what we are doing when we're stuck in that mode. Things are not very creative. We tend to do things the same way because nothing is really interesting in our movements. When I do something, I don't put an effort into that because I lack interest. There's no joie de vivre. It's boring to do practical stuff. And that boredom comes of, well, I don't know how to do things specific, because it's the specificity that gives the reward. It's the specificity when you change the gears in the bus, as these Greek people or Turkish people, whoever they were, they get pleasure from it. It's pleasurable to do things in a specific way. But we lose that in T2N2. And I felt that as a little bit of friction in the movement. It didn't come on, I wasn't jumping to the thing like that. It was no energy coming from the back. And this is maybe the most obvious thing when you go to an Alexander teacher and she or he will manipulate you and you get out of the chair like, oh my, this was like when I was 5 or 6 years old. I didn't feel anything, I just jumped out of the chair. And then you jump around, you strut around, you, what is it called, pounce. You pounce away like a happy animal, like a cow that's going out to the first green bait after winter. But then 15, 20 minutes later, it's gone, because you go back to your own pull down state. But it's fantastic. You really do things out of sheer pleasure and nothing else. And you know somewhere, this is how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be pleasurable. And we can't reach it because we are stuck in the T2 and 2. It is hard to get out. And the reasons is what I explained here. There's like momenta 22s all the way around here that sort of stops the input. You feel you're not suffering because you don't feel yourself. But we need to start in a small way, and that's receive input once more. And to understand that we have two different working states. And what will happen in the end, the other working state will slowly yield, go back. That will take time. It should take time. It shouldn't go as quick as I just demonstrated. It shouldn't take half an hour at an Alexander teaching. This needs to take time, so your body understands what's better for you. Because you need to appreciate it, you need to long for it, otherwise you won't do it. It's a little bit like we spoke in like 2 episodes of pilgrimage or peregrinage, that the whole idea, it's supposed to be laborious, strenuous, and take time. You're supposed to walk to your destination, the holy place, and then you will gather a sort of momentum, an emotional and a physical momentum, so you really can experience the thing you get to. And you need to long to do that. You really need to want to have it. And I think it's the same here. It's a pilgrimage to a sacred state of being, because there's no sacredness in T2 and 2. It's just stress. Nothing sacred could be there. It could be no intention, it could be no purpose, there could be no God. You could speak of a God, but you couldn't feel him. So it will never ring true. And you can speak about a free will, but because you don't have a free will anymore, the words won't ring true even to yourself. So this is, I shouldn't go too far into this, but I think his name is McGowan, an American. He says that this way is also a spiritual way to enrich in your life and discover sides of reality, whose depthness and gratitude and happiness you never dreamt of before. But that's maybe a little bit extra. I think well, it's of course also this with executing the stuff. You could say when you're in this state, there is no pause, there's no rest. And it's much more fun in N1, T1 because you are goal-oriented. Your whole body knows what it wants to do, and you will go to the task and you will immense energy almost immediately. And you will do it in the proper proportion. It won't be spent in an undue fashion. Like the person I saw a couple of weeks ago who was filling up his car and he was pressing like I don't know. And that is enforcing too much. And after you finish with your job, you won't feel pleasure because you didn't do it in this elegant way. We can get enormous amount of pleasure from our bodily activities, especially when we perform to our utmost best. We will not get that satisfaction in T2 and 2. It won't be there for you. You won't get any pleasure, and in the end you think pleasure is not part of life. Well, at least it's not part of your life. It could be the part of the Hollywood people or something like that. But I say it's always there. It could be taken back. You need to be decisive about it. And there is a lot of obstacles, but I think science like this and conviction can be very helpful, and especially when you get a taste for it. The first taste will help you to go in the right direction. You will crave it, and then you will do it when it's horrible. You will even enforce it, because this system will not give up voluntarily. It will not. It will not happen. It needs to be convinced, almost forced in some ways. But it's well worth it, because you're not a human being without it. You're something less. You're such a reacting organism that just reacts, and it's also a thinking process. The more complex thinking is gone, because you jump thinking-wise directly to the goal. You don't have in-depth thinking. It's a very shallow thinking, where you jump to conclusions, you do hastily generalizations, usually hastily generalization, everything is the same. It's a little bit like we mentioned the other day, actually, like Tversky, seeing things permanently at a distance. Whereas we need to change our focus. Sometimes see at a distance, sometimes see at a narrow. And I'd say that that's what the T1N1 can do. It can change its focus. It's not fixated in the long distance. Because in the long distance, everything looks the same. And that's sloppy thinking. It's not workable thinking. But I think it's a way to go out of this. And my first indication that I feel, I can actually body feel it. That's very important. And then the science, because we need to get convinced as well. This is the way to go. And I think this is just about enough for today. I say a very pleasant good afternoon, and see you soon. Bye bye.